Hi, Tamara Mills here again, picking up the Great USA by Larry Pahl, and we are going to start where we left off. We've been talking about America's place in prophecy, Bible prophecy. The first horn would seem to be the nation of Iraq and its former powerful dictator, Saddam Hussein. When his regime was in power, there was no diplomatic window dressing. He hated the West and taunted the U.S., calling it the Great Satan. And, of course, Iraq was invaded by the U.S. The prophecy said that the two powers were Media and Persia. Saddam's Iraq would seem to be the first horn of the ram, the power called Media. If so, we can now look for another, the Persian, because the prophecy is plain that the ram has two horns. Now that Iraq has been crushed by the economic and military power of the U.S., who is the other horn? The Persian horn. For centuries, the land now known as Iran was called Persia, and it is to Iran that we should look for the fulfillment of the second Islamic horn. Let us look at the description of these two horns in Daniel 8. The prophecy says, "Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns, and the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last." Daniel 8:3. As for these two horns being high, the Hebrew word carries the idea of being proud. Most observers would agree that Saddam Hussein was a very proud man. As proud as he was before his fall, this prophecy says that the next Middle Eastern power will be even more proud and more haughty. By the way, we have some Arabic names coming up in this thing, and I'm going to do my best, but I make no promises about the pronunciation. So bear with me. While it's always healthy to keep a certain tentativeness when it comes to any unfulfilled prophecy, there seems little doubt that the general meaning of this section of prophecy is that there will be tremendous conflict between Islamic and Western cultures. I know you're seeing it. If you pay attention to the news or the internet, well, maybe not the news, but the internet, you'll see plenty of that. Because on Facebook, every time I turn around, you've got Islamic people throwing hissy fits, not unlike spoiled children, and killing Christians in Nigeria, burning them alive. Just every time you turn around, I'm being discriminated against. And if you don't believe that Islam is the religion of peace, we'll cut off your head. Please, I know you see it. So, this clash, it's right there. And while it's possible that the nation to succeed Iraq and Saddam in this prophecy may not be Iran, there is very much evidence to believe that it will be. The first is the name mentioned by the angel, Persia. A second is that Iran is joined with Iraq, not on the basis of Arab unity, but on the basis of Islamic unity. In Daniel's vision, the two horns were joined together on a single ram, symbolically indicating that there will be some common element to which the horns are connected. Many Middle Eastern countries are Arabic, so that could be one common element, but Iran is not an Arabic country, it's Islamic. So this prophecy seems to point to religious, not ethnic solidarity. The unifying connection of Iraq and Iran is their Islamic connection. Iran and Iraq are among the few Middle Eastern countries that have more Shiite Muslims than Sunni. Now, this is some interesting information I had not known before. The Shiites and Sunnis are the two major divisions of Islam, sort of like the Catholic-Protestant split in Christianity. The Shiites are overall the minority Islamic sect, so their prevalence in Iran and Iraq is significant. Shiites make up less than 20% of Muslims worldwide, but in Iran they make up almost 90% of the Muslim population and over 60% in Iraq. Part of the problem with this is that the Shiites are fanatical, and the Muslims that you hear about most of the time are Shiite Muslims because, well, the squeaky hinge gets the oil. They get the attention because they squawk the loudest. And they are violent, fanatical, and much like a cancer, they're spreading. I mean, they're attacking the Sunnis, fairly benign people. I said fairly benign, not completely. And taking them over, and when they do this, the Sunnis, of course, that are taken over have no choice but to become Shiite, and the madness spreads, much like a fungus or a cancer. And much like a cancer, it continues to grow and perpetuate, and then eventually self-destruct, destroy the host. The only thing is they've got a lot of people on this earth to go through before that happens. Shiites make up less than 20% of Muslims worldwide, but in Iran, they make up almost 90% of the Muslim population and over 60% in Iraq. Shiites adhere to the teachings of Islamic prophet Muhammad and the religious guidance of his descendants known as Shia Imams, whom they consider to be infallible. Shiites assert the right of, here we go, Ali ibn Abi Talib, Muhammad's cousin and husband of Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, as successor of Muhammad, rejecting the legitimacy of the first three caliphs of Islamic history, who the Sunnis accept. Many Muslims, especially Shiites, believe that a descendant of Muhammad's, called the Imam Mahdi, will appear with Jesus at the end of time and restore righteousness, changing the world into a perfect and just Islamic society. Iran's current leader, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, believes we are in the same believes we are in the time when the appearance of the Imam Mahdi is imminent and the judgment day is at hand. He's got half of that right. He is an Islamic fundamentalist who has been belligerent to the U.S., the West, and the UN about the development of nuclear power in Iran. He has at times said that Iran's nuclear course is irreversible. He also believes that the Holocaust didn't happen and that the nation of Israel should be eliminated. He probably also believes in the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. And the Jews should be sent packing to another area. Add to this Iran's proven ties with Hezbollah and all its consequences for terrorism in the Middle East. And it's easy to see that there are many potential catalysts that could turn U.S. military power against Iran. Iran could certainly be the second Islamic horn predicted in the prophecy of Daniel 8. What happened? Sorry, I'm going to have to start up something so that my screen doesn't go blank. The haughtiness and pride of Ahmadinejad is apparent to all, even during his 2007 visit to the United States. And while he will probably not be the leader in power at the time of a potential U.S.-Iranian conflict, he symbolizes the pride and haughtiness pictured in the prophecy. Time magazine shocked many people when almost 30 years ago they named Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini as the Man of the Year in 1979. He single-handedly moved the nation of Iran from the modern course it had been taking to a radical, fundamental Islamic nation whose laws were tied to the Quran and whose orientation was hostile to the West. This relatively small country seized the U.S. embassy and held the West as a helpless hostage. Here's what the Time had to say about its choice for Man of the Year. In 1979, the Ayatollah Khomeini met Time's definition of Man of the Year. He was the one who has done the most to change the news, for better or for worse. Excuse me. The orientation of this Man of the Year was plain. Allah must reign, the U.S. is Satan. This country seemed very likely to be the one who spawns the haughty and proud second high horn of the ram. Let us turn our gaze for a moment from the two proud horns to the goat coming swiftly from the west. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west over the face of the whole earth and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Daniel 8:5. Here is a power coming from the west. It's another reference to Western civilization. This power comes over the face of the whole earth and doesn't touch the ground. This is not a reference to Alexander the Great, no matter how hard the commentators try to say these words apply to him. Alexander marshaled his troops on the ground, but in Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom, we used the air as a main line of initial attack. Our jets did not touch the ground. We came over the whole earth. Here is indeed another clue that this is a modern reference. Not touching the ground requires sophisticated air travel. What does the prophecy say will be the response to the rise of this second horn? The prophecy said that the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. Thus the goat is the West generally, and the horn is the clear leader of the West, the U.S. The unified action of this goat shows that the U.S. is both part of the West and it's also leading the way. That is certainly how the war against Iraq transpired. The U.S. led the way and the rest of the West tagged on reluctantly. Even though many nations have been angered by the U.S. initiatives in Iraq, this vision still has the U.S., the horn, connected with the West, the goat. Thus it seems likely that if the U.S. leads an attack on Iran, which is what the prophecy seems to indicate, the other Western nations will get on board, or at least not actively oppose the attack. I'm going to stop right here for a few moments. And this time, while this is uploading, I'm going to be recording another segment. I believe we have a winner with this one. So, wish me luck, and I hope the sound quality and volume is much better. See you in a bit.